My grandfather on my mother's side was Mordecai Ben Ami and participated in the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland, along with Theodor Herzl. My grandfather moved his family to Canada, to Montreal, and at the age of 14, my father turned to his father and said, I don't want to be part of the family business. I'm not interested in money. I'm moving to New York City to study at a yeshiva. When he finished his studies, my father thought about what he wanted to do next, and he decided to become a physician. Later, when he was doing his residency, he was asked to give a blood transfusion to a Gentile on Shabbat. And while he knew this wasn't right under the law, it felt right in his heart. And so he went ahead and did it. But he immediately knew that he had violated the halakha, the rules of the rabbis at the time. So he went back to New York City and met with his rabbis there and asked them if he had done the right thing. And they said no. He walked out of the yeshiva, bought a ham sandwich, and was never going to look back. Because if the law isn't true, then God's not true. And my father's heart was broken. My mother and father met in Israel and were married there and moved to New York City, and that's where I was born. We were raised in a very secular Jewish home, knowing that we were Jewish but never going to synagogue, not celebrating Shabbat or any of the holy days. In fact, we had a Christmas tree growing up because my father wanted us to be Americans. After college, I decided to move to Washington, D.C. to get involved in politics. And I was hired on the staff of a freshman senator that no one had ever heard of named John McCain. While I was serving on Senator McCain's staff, I was invited by another staff member to a breakfast. Then all of a sudden it got quiet. And one of the men, he pulled out a little book and he began to read from it. And as he was reading, the thought crossed my mind, is that the Bible? Is he reading the Bible in front of all these people? Is this a Bible study? So when one of the young men turned to me after introducing himself and asked, "What church do you go to?" I looked at him very sternly and I said, "I don't." I was invited to attend the National Prayer Breakfast. And when I did, something profound happened. My two loves in life, my two passions, were politics and classical music. My hero in politics was Secretary of State James Baker. He got up in front of 3,000 people and said, "It's pretty neat being Secretary of State to the wealthiest nation in the world. And it's pretty neat being Chief of Staff to the most powerful man in the world. And it's pretty neat being Secretary of State to the most influential country in the world. But the thing that's really getting me up in the morning these days, and I'm excited about, is Jesus." Did he just say Jesus? Why would James Baker talk about Jesus as something that's interesting to him? One of my heroes in music was Mislav Rostropovich. He was considered the greatest cellist of all time. He was Yo-Yo Ma before Yo-Yo Ma was Yo-Yo Ma. Rostropovich gets up and says basically the same thing as James Baker. It's pretty neat being the most famous cellist in the world, but the thing that really is interesting to me right now is Jesus. I thought, him too? Rostropovich? Maybe he's even Jewish. Why would he be talking about Jesus? Over time, I became convinced of one thing. This Jesus question was not going away. I decided the best thing to do would be to jump into it right now. So I thought a good place to start would be in the Bible. And I began on my own to start reading through the Bible for the first time ever in my life. I started in Genesis, and I read a chapter every day. I made it all the way through the Tanakh, and then I came to the book of Matthew. And I read through the genealogy of Matthew, and then I got to the Sermon on the Mount. And that's when it all came crashing in. That's our Messiah. That's my Messiah. I don't know what all these Christians are doing following him, but that's my Messiah. The enemy clearly doesn't want Jews to know who their own Messiah is, and so he overwhelms us with thoughts of betrayal and turning your back on people who were killed in the Holocaust or killed during the Spanish Inquisition, and I felt overwhelmed with these thoughts and fears as well. My great-uncle had passed away by then, but his eldest son, Moshe, pulled me aside and wanted to speak with me privately. He said, "John, when we met your wife, we knew immediately that she was a very deep spiritual person. She was familiar with the scriptures. There was just something about her that we knew was good. But there's one thing we can't understand. You've been married for 7 years. Why has she not converted to Judaism?" Because for him, that's the only way to be in a right relationship with God. And I said, "Moshe, there is a reason why she hasn't converted to Judaism. My father knows what it is. He's a little bit embarrassed about it. But if you really want to know, I'll tell you why she hasn't converted." He said, "Please tell me." I said, "Moshe, my wife and I believe that Messiah has actually been here once already. And a famous rabbi who came to that same conclusion once said, if you believe in the blood of this Messiah, then you automatically become in a right relationship with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so there was no need to convert. She's already in a right relationship with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." I didn't know how he would respond. Was he going to turn the table over, or tear his clothes, or shout at me and say, "Get out of here, and don't ever come back"? Instead, he started to daven, and he was pulling on his beard and thinking, and I assumed praying, and then he looked at me, and in Hebrew he said, "Yachol liot," which means, maybe so.